morning, beautiful peoples. So nice to see you. Be thou my vision, sweet guide of my heart. Grant me true wisdom and let fear depart. Your light in me shineth through doubt, vain alarm. Decide and do better is the soul's greatest song. Riches I need not, nor man's empty praise. Warriors of love, now forever you raise. To speak true to the mighty, no matter who hears, till that golden morning when justice appears. Be thou my wisdom and my perfect word. Guide us in peace, let us walk undeterred, and let our thought rest in the place we must go. For true love means progress, 'tis the natural flow. Let our thought rest in the place we must go. For true love means progress, 'tis the natural flow.
Woo! So this is Palm Sunday, and what I've done is taken a 12-week class of 24 hours in a class that I taught many years ago called What Would Jesus Do? And I'm shrinking it into 4 services. So today, I gave the first lesson first service. You'll get the second lesson. Third lesson will come on Good Friday, and then on Easter we'll just have a celebration, which is actually what to do after enlightenment. You know, you have this big experience, then what? So what? It's a so what if you don't do a what. If it doesn't follow through, if faith does not create works, it's a big so what. You know, how many of you have gone to things and these, and then next week, so what? Well, we'll talk about that next week. Next. The what of the so what is what we'll call it. This is the message, I believe, of, I believe that Jesus said, live this way. I don't think he said, follow me. I don't think he said, follow me. In fact, I'm absolutely sure he didn't. And there's just so much evidence that a lot of what we attribute to Jesus was actually codified in 305 with a group of people that said, what was he teaching? I know, let's make it solid. But it wasn't what he was teaching. I think he was always saying, live this way, live this way. Follow me meant, well, I always thought he was really saying, you follow me? But probably he was saying, probably he was just saying, live this way. Followers of Jesus, for the first 100 years called themselves followers of the way. This is a way of living. This is a way of experiencing harmony now, not later. Later came later, way later. So the stories about Jesus, some people have thought that they were a historical recording, which is actually kind of hysterical because it's impossible. The first gospel was written 30 years after Jesus died. Now think about it. Now think about somebody writing something down, and most of the people were not literate, so most of the people were not taking dictation. What'd you say? No, slow down. I got it, you know. Most people were not taking dictation. Most people were not literate, but the first gospel of Mark was written 30 years after he died. That would be like me writing the history of my grandfather. Now, the way I would view my grandfather was much different than most of my cousins. Way different than my mother. Way different than his sons. Everybody would have a version, maybe not accurate. We would just remember the things that popped up in our mind that had the most impact, and we would write them down. And most likely, because we're humans, we would embellish to make the story better. How many of you embellish? I should see hands. We embellish. It's normal, it's natural, it's not wrong, it's not bad. It's just the way it is. So we have stories handed down that were embellished upon. And they were embellished. What they were embellishing were what people could kind of keep track of, which was an oral tradition, and then written down a little bit. And those were the words that they thought Jesus said, his sayings. They did keep his sayings. The sayings, the most recent we don't have records of anymore. It's called the Q document, which means source. The source document of sayings that were incorporated into the first three Gospels. I'm giving you a history lesson. I know it's boring, but stay with me. I will become I'll become funny later. And then also the Gospel according to Thomas. They were just sayings. But sayings are hard to remember. So stories that people kind of remember, that oral tradition, were then put with the sayings to make the sayings more not only palpable, but memorable. And then eventually they were written down and canonized, which means solidified. But that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is that the book that I most resonate with now is the Gospel according to John. And it was really an oral tradition. It was really different. It was written 130 years after Jesus died. 130 years. That means no one around with Jesus wrote that. It was accredited to John because that gave it more solid, credence. Clearwater survival. No, I'm sorry, I just had to go there. But revival, not survival. But it is how it survived, is that they gave it a good name. It says John inspired this. I love this because it answers a few, It supports my belief that around the Mediterranean area, people were used to mystery schools and acting out the vibration of either holy people or gods or priests or priestesses or whatever. They acted them out. And John, I believe, was a mystery school for moving into the consciousness of the Christ. Now, that's just my belief system, and I'm not going to do the whole class on it because, as I said, that was a 12-week class, 24 hours, and I've only got 20 more minutes. So we'll just skip that part. And I gave the first part of the story, which included him having a posse. Have a posse. I'm just going to cut this short. Have a posse. Holy people have posses. If you think you're going to go it alone and you don't need help from anybody else and nobody needs to pray for you and you don't need to have the support of other people, get over yourself. Because if Jesus had them, Buddha had them, Lao Tzu had them, I don't know about Lao Tzu, that's embellishment. Hafiz and Rumi and all those people that we quote, if they had a posse, you can have a posse. And if you want to know who to have the posse, who's going to be in your posse, just say, I need a posse, and then start looking around. Because a lot of us are so isolated in our spirituality. We're just like, okay, I'm on this, like I'm doing this by myself. But why? I mean, I hand stuff off to people all the time. I put prayer requests out to our wonderful prayer practitioners all the time. I have a prayer partner. I ask them to pray for me. If I feel overwhelmed, I get help. And it works. I'm encouraging you to do that as well. We talked about his first miracle, which was in Canaan, and how that worked and how that happened. We also talked about the lesson of no one being outside the love of God by telling the story of him going through Samaria and sitting by a well and talking to a woman, that was a no-no. You don't talk to women, you don't talk to Samaritans, and you don't talk to prostitutes. 3 strikes and she should have been out. Instead, she was included and offered holy water. The water of eternal life. Come on. We got to get over this stuff. If people really lived that lesson, there could be no more prejudice in the world. No one is outside the love of God. No one is outside the grace of God. No one, no one, no one. And if somebody says, well, but they're different, well, get over yourself. Don't say it that way. Say it lovingly. Do as I say, not as I do. Okay, so let's continue the story. And this is an important story. It's an important story because it's told in all 4 Gospels. It's the only story told in all 4 Gospels, and it's the story of the feeding of the 5,000. By the way, 5,000, no one was doing the little clicker like they do when you go through Costco. Nobody was like, 4,009, 4,010. Nobody did that. 4,000 was a number. Like numbers had meanings. 4 meant a solid foundation. That's why there was 40 years in the desert and 40 years in 40 days in the desert for Jesus, 40 years for the Jewish people. The Buddha, 40 days under the Bodhi tree. 40 was a foundational number. 5 was a number of change. Things are changing. So 5,000 meant big changes coming. Big shifts in the way humanity will live. That's the significance of 5,000. And because I wondered why they all said 5,000 and nobody was counting. In Aramaic, when you put 1,000 on with anything, and in the idiom when you had an Aramaic idiom when it had any 1,000 after it, just meant a lot of people, we can't count them. And that was only the men. They also had their wives and children with them. So a bunch of people showed up, and he fed them. And I believe the reason that this story is told over and over again is because this is the way we can have a miracle in our own life. Who would like a miracle in your own life? Okay, all the time, but how many right now? Got one some specific? Good. So let's just go through this ourselves. The first one is, he went up to the mountain and sat down, meaning he raised his consciousness and he stayed there. A lot of us will have these epiphanies, like, whoa, like I can have epiphany. I can hear a song sometimes. Like I was talking with LaVon. There's a song that just takes me higher. Word of God speak, and I Am Light by, we always have those songs, right? You listen to it and we go, ooh. The one that's really wonderful is the one written by Andrew Lloyd Webber, who poor, deprived Jake has never heard. Andrew Lloyd, some people are just live in poverty. Anyway, Jesus Christ Superstar, where Jesus is singing at Gethsemane. Remember that song? I don't want to do this, but I'll do it because you told me to. It's wonderful. It's just amazing. And I go, wow. It's amazing. So we will have those peak experiences, but we peak and then we come back down. It's like, wasn't that nice? No, find a way to stay there. He went to the mountaintop and he stayed there. Now, this is just an idiom because I was there. You were there. James was there. I'm looking at James right now. And we were there. They're hills. They were hills. mountain my eye. It was barely a molehill. Anyway, but he went up there, and the whole idea with a mountain is that he went above normal thinking, and he sat down and he stayed there. He reached for that higher consciousness, and he stayed there. Now, there's a way to go there, by the way, that's easy. Just look up. You know, mysticism is so much easier than anything that's ever been taught. There's the science of mind, and then there's taking no thought. And you look up, and you stay there. You don't just go, "Bleh," and you stay there. Look into the hills, from whence cometh thou salvation? There's so many scriptures about just looking up. Jesus, when he made most of his miracles, when he did his prayers, he looked up. Now, they say he looked up, but what if they saw that, oh my goodness, you know what? I noticed that whenever he was praying and something wonderful happened, he'd been looking up. And then what happens is, when you look up, your thoughts are not you're going to have to just try this yourself. You will find that your thoughts shift. They will not be your thoughts, they will be God thoughts. There's something that will occur to you that you of yourself would not have thought of, because it does not come out of your history, and it's not logical. It's a download. And so out of that download, then he says, let's feed them. And his disciples go, no. Get a grip, it's impossible. I know you're on some sort of like high, but let's be realistic. We've only got, I think they said 1,300 pennies or something, and that's not going to buy enough. And he says, well, what else do we have? And he said, well, yeah, right, sure. We got 5 loaves of barley bread and 2, smoked fishes. Not going to go very far. Now, there probably weren't 5,000 people out there, but there was more than 5 loaves and 2 fishes could handle. How many of you get there? How many of you get inspired and then you get logical? Tell the truth. This is our story. The story was told because it's our story. This is the way. Are we going to fall back down? There is no power of healing in a depressed or desperate state of consciousness. And that's what can happen. We get so involved in our story, it drags us down. His disciples got so involved in facts, it drove them down. How many of you, truly, isn't this really the conflict that can happen in so many of our minds? I think, let's get real. You can almost hear the little, let's get real, Kathianne. From an exalted place of consciousness, he spoke what he wanted to have done. He did not ignore the facts. He didn't ignore the facts. He just wasn't influenced by the facts. There's a big difference. Now, I want to talk about how this could become real for you, because I'm thinking about starting, there was Weight Watchers. I'm thinking about starting Wealth Watchers. Because I think sometimes we get so spiritual, we are not good with our material assets. And if you could blend the two together, there'd probably be a whole lot less poverty in this world. Just saying. So a lot of people, when I was working with them, they don't really know if they overspend. They don't really know how much they are in debt. And they don't really know what they're spending their money on, because they don't want to look. It got really quiet in consciousness in here. You don't ignore that part. You just don't succumb to that part. Do you see the difference? You don't ignore what your finances are. You're just not the victim of your finances. You stay high so that they can be lifted up. Because if you fall down, it's hard to lift them up. It's the same thing with your body. Don't not go to the doctor. Don't not get a diagnosis. but you're not the victim of that diagnosis. Because you have one divine doctor as well as the doctors that work for you and for God. So he took into account what there was. That's why they say in all four Gospels they had this many loaves and this many fish. Somebody took account. And then what he did was he gave thanks for what he had. So many of us, how many of you, not you, because I know you're holy, but you have relatives that look at the facts and curse the facts. They look at the facts and they go, look at this. Well, I don't mean to make it wrong, but you know what I'm saying. They look at the facts and then this is a problem and that's a problem and I can't overcome it. And what? Instead, yay, I've only got 2 cents. Praise God. There's so many stories in the Bible about the great prophets working with so little, but they did it out of blessing and thanksgiving. And the little became much. Like, I can't, I'm going to let you work this out in your own mind because you know how to do this. I'm just giving you the format, the template. So he gave thanks for what he had, and then he acted. Too many of us don't want to act until it's all lined out really good. Too many people don't want to give until they have a big surplus. No. Give when you have very little. Really. You don't have time? Give some time. You don't have money? Give some money. You don't feel appreciated? Give appreciation. You don't feel loved? Make sure somebody else does. You give and you start the flow. It shows up in almost all the miracle stories in the Bible, and that they're told because it is a fact of life that if you want something, you give it first. It's in the Peruvian tradition with indigenous people. It's called Aini. It's give first, you'll get it back. Give first, you'll get it back. Give first. But Jesus made it even bigger. You will get back multiplied, pressed down, and running over. It's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. So the people were fed. Now, I want to share with you something because I think this is something that's sometimes missed with this particular miracle story. And that is God works for us now. People needed to be fed now, and he did not give them a sermon about, in the great by and by, you're going to have a banquet in heaven. No, heaven's now. God is sufficient now. We can do this now. Not there, and I'm working with some practitioners right now and some ministers, and I'm doing this myself, and I'm encouraging them to do it, to erase the idea that it takes time. It takes time because we believe it takes time. We have been seduced into time. God has no time. That's why Jesus said now is the appointed moment. Now. And for us to move there, oh my goodness. What a wonderful people mover we would be on. We're just like, it's like, I need to be there, and when I'm there, I will be so contagious, time will evaporate for this community. I'm working on it. I'm just telling you right now, this is my miracle that I want for myself, is that time evaporates because we're so enslaved to it. I've got to take this class. I've got to finish this. I haven't taken Beyond Limits. Oh, I prayed, and I know it will happen. Listen to this. I know what will happen means it's not happening yet. And so, by thy words and how we use them creates the effects that we want or don't want. Jesus, and this story was teaching, the way of Jesus was teaching that God provides present supply. God is a present help. I am an ever-present help. Yea, I am with you always, even unto the ends of the earth. Now I want to talk about sin. Now let's just get into the good stuff. Sin and worthiness and becoming good enough. It was recorded that Jesus couldn't be one of God's chosen ones because he came out of Galilee. And I think I just saw Andrea Weatherhead walk in. Yeah, so she's the only one that's going to get this. And she's already shaking her head. She knows what I'm going to say. That's like me believing I can't do anything good because I come from Springfield, as opposed to Eugene. Thank you for laughing. We discount ourselves as divine beings because of our past, our present, our heritage, our ethnicity, our training. What a bunch of bunk. He came out of Galilee so that anybody could show up and be the presence of light. Anyone could show up and be the presence of love. Get over yourself. I want to say that with all the love I can. Get over yourself. So let's have an affirmation. And I'm going to say it first, and then I'll ask you to repeat after me. I work the works of God who works through me to will and to do all that needs to be done by me. So let's say that. I work the works of God who works through me to will and to do all that should be done by me. And, this is like, we need to take Jesus up on this one. Because he said, greater things than I have done, ye shall do also. I'm into greater things. And people have done greater things. People have done greater things. A little old skinny guy named Gandhi started the dissemination of the British kingdom, of the British nation. What they call it? The empire. Oh my gosh. The evil. No, never mind. Almost went into Star Wars there for a second. Anyway. Oh, yeah, you know that. But not Jesus Christ Superstar. We're praying for you. Oh, jeez. I mean, what? Martin Luther King. Nelson Mandela. Abraham Lincoln. Joseph Salk. Jonas Salk. What was got the polio? What was his first name? Joseph Salk. I mean, come on. Jonas Salk. Yeah, thank you. I mean, people have done amazing things because they were not hampered by the idea that it's just little old me. What would you do if little old me died on Good Friday and you got resurrected into your higher self, living as that, for the good and the glory of not only God, but everyone around you? Now that's a story to be told. Greater things than these, ye shall do also. And the last thing I want to talk about is sin, just because I've only got 3 minutes, I'm going to be quick. Sin has sometimes been described by some as a transgression so bad that it needs heavenly retribution. Or it's just heavy retribution. And yet Jesus tells, or the story is told of Jesus healing a blind man. And his disciples, and I bet it's this is the new thought consciousness, his disciples said, so who sinned that made him blind? Him or his parents? And he said, neither have sinned. Isn't this kind of like, wonder what's in their consciousness that created this? How many of you have done that to yourself or thought that about others? I mean, some people have thought that. How'd that happen? How'd that happen? Okay, here's the lesson of this. Shit happens. Shit happens. Now, you can either succumb to that, blame that, discourage that, or say, you know what? God, glorify yourself in this shit. I just heard myself say that. But that's exactly what Jesus said. This no, he didn't say it. This is not well, it was 130 years later, so who knows what he really said. But what he basically said is, everything that's a problem is here so that God can be glorified. Whether it's through a healing or a revelation of completeness anyway, we don't know what that is. And we're to look for God's glory, not for blaming how somebody created it. That doesn't go anywhere. That's looking down. That's not looking up. That's not seeking spirit. That's seeking blame or shame. And like the lesson that is told when the prophets and Jesus and others would rise up or go up into the hills and to the mountains. You have to go above the blame and the shame and the stuff. And you stay there. Okay, God, what's your idea about this? What can be done here? What's my part? What can I do? What am I called to do? What am I called to profess? What am I called to say? How am I called to pray? How can I contribute? How can I love? How can I give? How would you have me live? What is the way? That's the question. And so I give thanks that this time together is truly a wonderful opportunity for us to look into what is the way of the evolving Christ within humanity. As Ernest Holmes defined the Christ, it is God within us. And some people have discovered that, and some people were known for it. Some people were, undercover cops for God, doing the work of God sneaky-like. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how it moves through humanity, but let it move through humanity. May it move through me. May it move through us or all who say yes. And if you're in your heart of hearts who say yes, then it is done. And greater things, and it might be the greater things are little things. Doesn't mean big, huge, history-making things. Jesus died as a thief, an imposter. He died betrayed. He died vilified, blamed and shamed. And yet, God had another idea. So we will not judge what is ours to do. But we will proceed knowing that grace is on our side. And so it is.